Performing well on the PSAT sets you up for success on the SAT by giving you the skills, experience, and confidence that you need. Your PSAT score can even predict your future SAT score. I got a perfect score on the PSAT my freshman year, and I'm going to give you the secret tips that you can actually use to boost your PSAT score and make your parents proud. And at the end, I'll even give you a bonus gift to make prepping a breeze. Now, let's get to the good stuff. Since the PSAT is a pre-SAT, you don't need to focus too much about studying a ton unless you're trying to learn the concepts for the future. You really just need to get a taste of the tests by taking like practice tests to familiarize yourself with the types of questions and answers that you should be expecting on the test. You also probably want to have like a goal time budget for each of the questions, and on the screen I have like some sample time budgets depending on the version of the test you're taking. Generally the rule is that you have like a little over a minute per question, and then you want like 5 to 10 minutes at the end to review and get back to those challenging questions. Finally, you want to familiarize yourself with the digital version of the test and all the tools available to you on the Bluebook app, which is now like the official digital test taking place for the SATs. If you want to do more extensive prep for the PSAT because A, you're not comfortable with the score you're going to get right now, or B, you just want to prepare more for the future SAT, then go to the description. I have a list of all the extensive prep you need to do with basically everything you need to do to have be fully prepared for the tests. So now we're on to the actual tips that will help you get a good score on the test. And these tips actually start the night before the test, because getting good sleep is the #1 performance booster that you can give yourself to perform well on the test. Hopefully your sleep schedule is already good and you've seen my video on sleep, but if not, try and get your screens off early and go to bed like an hour or two before your usual bedtime at like 9 or 10. If you need help falling asleep fast and sleeping well, I recommend following the 3-2-1 rule. The 3-2-1 rule basically says 3 hours before you sleep, finish eating your food, 2 hours before you sleep, finish drinking your water, and 1 hour before you sleep, turn off your screens. Food and screens are the two most important parts of the 3-2-1 rule. Your eating cycle is super connected to your circadian rhythm, which is basically your body's internal clock, and it basically decides when you want to fall asleep. And the light in screens is the most important thing for actually falling asleep. The rule says 1 hour before your bedtime, you should turn off your screens, but I think you should extend this to basically all light and not even 1 hour. I'd say if you can extend it to 90 minutes or just as soon as the sun sets, trying to make everything as dim as possible and using as little screens as possible. And whenever you're using screens, setting them to like the warm fire like light. The setting on iPhone I think is called like night mode, and on the computer you can download an app called f.lux, which will basically make your computer screen a lot warmer. So now that you've gotten a great night of restful sleep, it's the morning of the test. Contrary to popular opinion, which says you should have a big breakfast so you get all the nutrients and energy you need for the day of test taking, I actually recommend having a lighter breakfast. While it's true that having the energy necessary for a day of test taking is very helpful, you don't want to be very full or even full at all when you're going into taking the test, because this will make your performance and your mind sharpness a lot worse, since your body is going to be split between all the energy and blood rushing to digest your food and also all the energy you need to perform with your brain. I recommend natural foods like fruit, yogurt, oatmeal, nuts, and eggs. And if you're not used to eating breakfast, I actually recommend just fasting to keep your mind extra sharp for the test, and then bringing along some wholesome snacks like nuts so that you're not actually hungry or starving during the test. It's also very useful to bring a water bottle so you can stay hydrated during the test. However, with the water bottle, you should try and avoid drinking too fast or gulping your water. This is a little trick from the Huberman Lab podcast. So basically, if you gulp your water and drink it really fast, then you'll want to pee a lot quicker. You'll have that urge, compared to if you sip the same amount of water over a little bit of a longer time period, then it'll be a while before you need to pee. If you ever get nervous during the test, especially right before the test starts, or during the breaks, I recommend using a breathing technique called the physiological sigh, which is basically a double inhale where you inhale until you almost can't inhale anymore, and then inhale a little bit more, followed by an extended exhale. If you want to try it with me right now, it's basically like and if you ever feel nervous during test day or just any time, honestly, if you just do that like a few times, 5 to 10 times, you'll start feeling a lot calmer and being in a lot more focused of a state. Now for my 6 reading and writing tips. When you first approach a reading question, it can be really helpful, especially on those hard passages, but it's pretty useful for any passage to first really quickly flip over and look at those questions first. Skim through them so that you prime your mind to know what it's looking for when you're reading the passage. Then once you get to the passage, a tip is to take your mouse or pencil and trace the text while underlining all of the important bits. Tracing the text basically helps you stay focused and read quicker, while underlining the important bits helps you come back through the text a lot easier once you've actually gotten to the questions. Next, when you're actually trying to answer the questions and interpret them, you should only ever answer answers that are explicitly backed by the text. A lot of times, the test takers or test makers are going to trick you, the test takers, by having a very similar answer to what is right, but adding some context or knowledge that isn't given in the text that you probably already know, or by just expanding the scope of the text a little bit. When you're answering the questions, try and answer them as if you've never heard of the topic or concept before, so that you're never adding your own knowledge or context to the answers. And a very similar tip, but also super important, is since all of the answers, or at least a lot of them, are going to be made to feel right, you should, instead of focusing on trying to find the one right answer, focus on identifying all of the wrong answers. You should look through each question, especially if you're struggling, and see where does this answer deviate from what has been given to me in the text. Now for the writing section, there aren't as many just tricks that you can use to figure out the answer. A lot of them are based off of just grammar rules or just proper writing rules that you've learned throughout your time at school, hopefully. However, if you're not having the time to actually cram and learn all the grammar rules and stuff you don't know, a quick tip is that when you get to a grammar question, plugging in the answer and just reading it out loud will hopefully increase your accuracy by some. This isn't an infallible strategy, but since you've probably been speaking English your entire life, your unconscious knows what sounds right and will probably be more accurate than if you try and overthink the question. Finally, we have my 5 math tips for the PSAT. When you first approach a math question, you should start by underlining the part of the question that you're actually solving for, what the question actually wants you to give it. A lot of the math points you lose out on are just careless mistakes, and identifying the answer that you're actually trying to give helps prevent a lot of them. For word problems or wordy problems, you should, after identifying the part of the question you're actually solving for, you should try and translate the words into math equations. And on the screen right now is basically a list of generally what words in word problems translate to what math symbol or what meaning. The process of elimination works really well on all the questions, but it works especially well on math questions. Since the PSAT and all the SATs only have one right answer, that means all the other answers have to be mathematically incorrect. This means you can sometimes just prove answers are wrong by plugging in the values into the equation. And whenever you're trying to plug in values to figure out what's right, you should always start with the middle answer, the most middle value, which is usually C, and then working up or down based off of the answer you got from plugging that in. Diagrams are one of your best friends. If you don't know what to do, especially for geometry questions or questions that have you visualize some phenomenon or scenario, drawing out a diagram can really help you figure out what to do next and fill in the blanks of the knowledge that you couldn't think of and hold in your mind. And even if you do know what to do, drawing a diagram is super helpful for just helping you prevent those silly mistakes. And on screen right now are some examples of diagrams you can use for various questions. While the test does provide you with a calculator, you shouldn't use it just because you have it. The calculator is usually just reserved for like those big numbers that are really hard to compute on your own, because all the questions can A, be solved without a calculator, and B, are a lot of times easier to be solved without the calculator, since using a calculator just slows down your process. However, obviously, if it's easier to use a calculator in any scenario and you think it'd help, go for it. Finally, for people who are pretty comfortable with math, the math section is generally considered as the easiest section. And a lot of people do finish with tons of time to spare, sometimes even like half the time remaining. So if you are one of those people, you should go back through after you finish it, after you've checked out like the hard questions that you labeled while going through initially, and just trying to solve through the questions one more time, but this time without even looking at the answer choices first, so that you're more confident with your answer. And when you're going through a second time, it'll obviously be quicker since you already know how to solve the questions. Since you watched basically the whole video, go to the description right now. There's a free checklist prep guide for everything you need to do to prepare for the test, and there's even tips included. Your PSAT score can set you up for success on the SAT, but it's not that important, and you can do well on the SAT without doing well on the PSAT, which is what actually matters. So don't stress over it, and good luck on your test.